You will see this picture making rounds in many Islamic websites and Islamic YouTube channels. They claim that this picture shows that two seas meet but they do not mix, and this is very much in accordance to this particular surah 55 verses 19 to 20 of the Quran, which reads as follows: He has let free the two bodies of flowing water meeting together. Between them is a barrier which they do not transgress. So the Islamic websites claim that this is definitely a miracle because this thing was not known 1400 years ago, and scientists very recently have discovered such a fact. To prove that this verse is a scientific miracle, they would put forward this particular picture where Atlantic Ocean meets the Mediterranean Sea near the Strait of Gibraltar, and they would show that this Atlantic Ocean water, although meets the Mediterranean Sea water, these two water bodies remain chemically distinct, and therefore they would say that they do not mix, and therefore there is a barrier between them, and hence, lo and behold, this verse is a scientific miracle. However, Atlantic Ocean and Mediterranean seas do mix. I mean, that is a very important phenomena in oceanography, which we will come later. But this picture itself actually completely contradicts the verse, because in this picture, the Mediterranean Sea has actually transgressed into the Atlantic Ocean water, and therefore it completely violates this particular surah. In order to convince the gullible Muslims, Islamic apologetics have come up with far more appealing animations. Let's watch a couple of them.
He has let free the two bodies of flowing water, meeting together. Between them is a barrier which they do not transgress. The expression of the verse has a mind-blowing style. For the verse informs us that the seas do not mingle with one another despite all storms and huge waves. Yes, science confirms the verses of the Quran as it always has been and proves that it is the word of Allah. It is as follows. The French marine scientist, Captain Jacques Cousteau, who is famous for underwater research, explains the results of his investigations about water barriers as follows. These two seas, which merge at the Strait of Gibraltar, were supposed to be equal or at least near to equal in terms of salinity, density, and life forms that they had. However, these two seas have different structures even in places where they converge closely. Upon our investigations, we came across an event that amazed us. There was a great water curtain at the merging point that did not allow these two seas to mix. The same kind of water barrier was found by German scientists at Bab al-Mandab, where waters of Gulf of Aden and Red Sea converge in 1962. In our later investigations, we witnessed the existence of the same kind of barrier in all merging points of seas that have different characteristics. This amazing fact, which amazed Captain Cousteau about the waters that do not mix up though seas converge, is explained with the following verse in the Quran 14 centuries ago.
Let's watch another short clip which basically says the same thing again and again, that there is a barrier between Atlantic and Mediterranean. Let's go for it.
This property of the seas, that is, that they meet and yet do not intermix, has only very recently been discovered by oceanographers. Because of the physical force called surface tension, the waters of neighboring seas do not mix.
Now the last video was hilarious because it didn't stop at saying that there is a barrier between Atlantic and Mediterranean seas. It went one step further, saying that the barrier, the physical reason behind the barrier, is the surface tension force. Right, and anyone with a basic understanding of fluid mechanics knows that surface tension acts at very small length scales, like droplets. Surface tension has absolutely no effect in large scale flows like oceanic flows. Enough of watching cartoons and animations by imbeciles. Let's watch something real science. Let's watch what NASA Scientific Visualization Studio has to say about the flow around the Mediterranean Sea. So, to the left of your screen is the Atlantic Ocean, and to the right it is the Mediterranean Sea, and the narrowest region is the Strait of Gibraltar. And we are going to see the flow currents in the Mediterranean Sea region from 16 February 2005 to 16 January 2006. Right now, we are looking at the Mediterranean Sea. The white arrows represent surface currents, that is, the flow occurring at the surface of the Mediterranean Sea. The blue arrows represent the flows occurring at greater depths. You can actually see the Atlantic Ocean. It is to the top left corner of the screen. We are slowly moving towards the Atlantic Ocean. Actually, we are moving towards the Strait of Gibraltar, where the Mediterranean Sea meets the Atlantic Ocean. Inside the Mediterranean Sea, you can see some large scale circulations happening. So, we are very close to the Strait of Gibraltar, and we have actually reached the Strait of Gibraltar. It's just at the narrowest region, and you can see that currents from the Atlantic Ocean entering inside the Mediterranean Sea. So there is no such water curtain or barrier that prevents the Atlantic Ocean to enter into the Mediterranean Sea. And likewise, Mediterranean Sea water also flows into the Atlantic Ocean as deeper currents, because to conserve mass, if something comes inside the Mediterranean Sea, something has to go out also. So there is no such barrier between them, that water from both sides happily transgress. I have provided the link to the full NASA video in the description. Do check it out. I believe that now you are convinced that there is no such water curtain that prevents transgression of two seas. The animations shown by the Islamic miracle scientists are completely wrong, and so is the Quranic verse in question. In fact, this Quranic verse is a scientific disaster. It is quite unfortunate that these Islamic miracle scientists are trying to mislead Muslims by projecting a blatant scientific error as a scientific miracle. They can only trick people with little understanding of oceanography and a large confirmation bias. When two water bodies of different densities flow side by side, basic principles of fluid mechanics and oceanography tells us that these water bodies would transgress into each other's territories because of horizontal pressure gradients. Note that while we mostly discussed about meeting of Atlantic and the Mediterranean Sea simply because it is the favorite example of Muslim apologetics, the same principles would be valid when any two seas meet. Do check out NASA's Perpetual Ocean video. I highly recommend it. Now, if you do a Google Scholar search on Atlantic and Mediterranean mixing, it returns a whooping 165,000 results. I just picked the first journal paper by Barringer and Price. It is entitled Mixing and Spreading of the Mediterranean Outflow, and it was published in the Journal of Physical Oceanography. Let's read the underlined text. As this Mediterranean water flows westward through the Strait of Gibraltar and the Gulf of Cadiz, it mixes with and entrains the overlying North Atlantic Central water. Mixing is an outcome of water bodies transgressing into each other. Water's density is a function of temperature and salinity. Higher the temperature, lower the density. Higher the salinity, higher the density. Water in different parts of the global ocean has different temperatures and salinities, and hence different densities. These density differences lead to transgression, as shown in this picture, the global thermohaline circulation. Thermo means temperature and haline means saline or salinity. Red colors represent surface currents and blue the deep current. White arrows represent the direction of the flow. So you can see that water from the Southern Ocean makes it to the Arctic and vice versa, and water from Pacific makes it to the Atlantic and vice versa. So how much more transgression do you want? In fact, without this transgression, there would be no deep mixing. There is a very famous quote in oceanographic literature. Without deep mixing, the ocean would turn within a few thousand years into a stagnant pool of cold, salty water. Before wrapping up, how can I forget the favorite picture of the Islamic miracle scientists? They show it as an absolute proof that the two seas of different color flowing side by side do not mix. Even for the sake of argument, if I assume that the Quran verse in question is true, then still can we say that it is a scientific miracle? No, absolutely no. Why? Because humans are sailing for many thousands of years and such color contrasts is not uncommon. So people living much before the time of Prophet Muhammad has seen such a color contrast and have simply come to the conclusion that the two seas meet but they do not mix. But if you have a scientific mind, you will ask the following questions. Number one, how do I know for sure that what I am seeing is an everlasting phenomena? Number two, I can only see the ocean surface and have no information of what is happening below. How can I conclude that the so called barrier which I am seeing at the ocean surface extends all the way down to the ocean bottom? To make the second point clearer, let's see this picture where a river filled with sediments merged with a clear river. But the clear river is not transparent, so I cannot say whether the sediment laden river transgresses into the clear river. However, if the clear river happens to be transparent, I clearly see that the sediment laden river has actually transgressed. Thus, you have taken this picture purely on face value, and your confirmation bias did the trick. Let's see what the oceanographer from University of California, Santa Cruz, by the name Ken Bruland, who actually took this picture, has to say about it. He gave an interview in France 24. Read the underlined texts with me. He says that it's not true to say that the two bodies of water aren't mixing. The border between one type of water and another is always moving, sometimes disappearing completely according to the level of sediment in the water and other factors. So, in summary, Surah 55, verses 19 to 20 is a scientific blunder. Thanks for watching.